Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to continue our series on Python. We're going to be taking a look at how to create a project in PyCharm, and we're also going to be looking at the print command as well as making comments, pretty basic stuff, but things that people kind of forget because it gets a little tricky. So first things first, we've opened up PyCharm here. We've got Python installed. If you need details on that, you can go grab it from the previous video. If you're looking for any of the files that we actually create here, I'm going to make one big zip file and basically toss them all into the comments below so that you can basically open it up and grab any chapter that you need depending on what we do together. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and create ourselves a new project. And for my purposes, I'm going to create one project that's going to have all of our lessons in it, just to kind of keep it a little bit easier. So I'm going to come up here and press the new project button. And now there's going to be a lot of little things that you're going to see here. You're going to see that it's going to ask for a name. I'm going to go ahead and call this Python Tutorials YouTube. I'll keep it nice and simple for myself. This is actually a little sloppy because it's a very, very long name. Coming from the old days where things could only be 8 characters long, like I said, this is a little sloppy. Location, make sure this is in a spot that makes sense to you. If you want to make this very, very complicated, you can very quickly. One of the things I'm actually going to do is I'll go into here, and one of the weird things that they changed is your desktop is now in here, which is just a little different. So I can press go ahead and let's see your new folder here, create a new folder name, YouTube, Python. I'll go ahead and keep it nice and simple for myself. I press the OK button, and that's going to go ahead and toss that up here in the upper left, as you can see pretty clearly. It's going to say, do you want to get repository or welcome script? We can do these things another day, not today. One thing we do want to take a look at, though, is you'll notice here that it locked onto the correct Python version. If we needed a different version of Python, we'd have to actually come in here and tweak this, but you can see it's found the one we installed. So I'm going to come down here and press the create button. And of course, it's going to sit here. It's going to create a virtual environment. It's going to be setting everything up. And as soon as you do this, if we actually would open up the YouTube folder that we created here, one of the things you'll observe, it is actually completely empty. This is a good thing for us. And one of the cool things is, as we create individual files, you'll see them start to appear here, kind of over here on the left, making your life a little bit simpler for that kind of a thing like that. So there's a lot of little things. The first one that everybody doesn't like very much is you're sitting there going, my friend, we are on a 1080p screen, and I can't even see that this is the word go. So the other thing you probably notice is if I open this full screen, your eyes go bzzz, and basically you can feel the pain. One of the things I love about this program is it is highly customizable. So one of the things we can do is actually the little gear in the top. And one of the things we have is settings. Now, if you go to settings, though, one of the options you have is actually theme. So you can come in here and you can actually pick different themes. So for example, if I want to go to a dark theme, I can pick it. Dark themes are good, but I actually prefer high contrast because it makes it easier to read. The other thing you can do, again, if you're looking at this on a little cell phone screen right now, God bless you, you can always come down here and you can also adjust the zoom. So for example, if I want to go to 200%, press OK there, that's going to make everything much bigger. It's going to be vastly easier to see. So I'm actually going to keep it at 200%. And this seems like a bit much, but it's actually not bad. Like I said, nothing too much. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and create our first Python program. Now, the nice thing about Python is they keep it relatively isolated. In the old days, you basically run a program that contained everything. And now in Python, it is more like Java, where everything's individual files, kind of keep it a little easier. So if we come up here, the first mistake everybody does is they come around up here and hit new project. Whoops. But instead, we're interested in a new file. And what you'll notice here is there's a lot of different options that we have here. Again, PyCharm has a lot of really fun things you can play through. Jupyter Notebook, tons of fun. We're not going to take a look at that at all, unfortunately. Very cool, though. So I'm going to click on Python file, and it's going to say, did you want a file, a unit test, or a stub? We're interested in a Python file. Unit tests, that is for another day. They're very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and call this our first program here. Since we're on part 0 here, on part 1, I'm going to say part 1 print. Keep it nice and simple there and press the OK button. Now, when you first open one of these files, there's really nothing to it. It is a blank document. When people sit there and start working with Python, they're sitting here and starting to go a little panicky. They're like, where's the stuff? Where do I click on the buttons? I'm coming from scratch or something like that. Or, of course, I think there's PyBlock, which is a lot of fun as well. And that's not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, just because our program is empty doesn't mean our program doesn't work. One of the fun things you can actually do is run up here and press run, and you'll observe that our little terminal pops up down here to say your program exited with code 0. It actually worked. Our program's fine, even though there's absolutely nothing in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple different things that we like to do when we program. One of the first things we do, and this again comes from being a high school/college teacher, is we always like to put our name on the paper. Now in Python, so we're going to go ahead and type in our names here. If I did pgatcom just like this, pop that on the top. If I ever try to run my code now, as you can see, it's going to explode. It actually gives me 3 error warnings here. Like, again, this is one of the nice things about using an IDE over idle. Is it smart enough to know you done goofed? And I'm like, oh gosh, what have I done here? And the problem here is we have tried to type in something that it just does not recognize. There is no syntax like this. Now, as a programmer, I'm visualizing how I could make this program actually work the way you see it. but it doesn't work very well. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this into a comment. And to make something into a comment, we simply put a single hashtag in front of the line and then a space. Now, when I do this, of course, what you'll observe is this has changed color. Now, if I were to execute my code another time, you'll observe that it is now going to set exit code 0. Everything's fine. My program is now running. You also see this angry little reminder down here saying, are you sure you didn't mean Zatom? And I'm like, no, man, Gatcom, not Zatom. I don't know. That just seems to be where that was going. So, Gordon, this is one of the nice things about PyCharm. One of the downsides is it's going to be like, are you sure this is what you wanted? Are you sure? Are you sure? Again, a weak warning, one typo. Like, what are we going to do? So what I always like to do is like to say what something is. So print examples. Simply print examples, and often what I do is also put the date on it, depending on what I want to do. Now, in Python, space is free. So a lot of people say, does this program work the same way as this program? Yes, it absolutely works the exact same way. You're not going to get penalized for a dead space here. The only time that gets interesting is when you start working with things like file names. Then it gets a little bit more annoying. One of the things you will see from time to time, especially if you're working in PyCharm, is it will yell at you because you did something that is not in the correct style. Let me show you what I mean by that. So if I do hashtag wrong style, you'll notice that it has this little thing right here that's yelling at me saying, hey, what the heck are you doing here? And the reason it's yelling at me, and see it's got the yellow bar under it, is basically saying you're supposed to put a space here. And if I put a space there, of course, it's not going to yell at me because I put a space here. And if I delete that space, now we're in the correct style once again. And again, it's just going to be something you will see from now on. See how it says end of line and no file? Theoretically, that's how we're supposed to end it, with a single new line. And again, if you make any of those little style errors, there's nothing wrong with the program. It's just going to yell at you and say, well, according to the style, you need to do this. And we'll try to be careful with that. And again, I'm not perfect. And one of the things I teach my students, and many years of students, you got to learn from your mistakes. I will not be perfect in these videos. I promise you, I will make the stupidest mistakes that'll make you scream at the monitor, but so shall you. Otherwise, that's how we learn, right? So let's get into what a command is in Python. In Python, there's a lot of different commands. There are many commands. And the best way to think about a command is there's two parts. It's going to be the noun, and it's going to be the verb. The verb is the command itself. It's like, what do you want to do? It's an action. The noun is going to be, what do you want to do with it or to it? For example, let's say we had a command in Python called eat. Now, eat, of course, you're going to get all sorts of angry warnings here because there is no eat command. We could make an eat command for demonstrations here, but I'm not going to do that until we get over to functions pretty soon, like I said. Now, what we do in Python is almost all of our commands are going to always have parentheses that follow them. And you can actually see that our good buddy VS Code knew that we were going to have those parentheses and actually built the second parenthesis for us. Now, one of the things I really like is if I go like this by accident, VS Code, also PyCharm, is going to be smart enough to know that we goofed up there, and it'll let us know that you got yourself an extra parentheses. Remember, it's just like the refrigerator. If you open it, you got to close it. So this guy here is going to be the first part of our command. This is going to be, like I said, the verb. The noun is going to be whatever we shove inside there. What are we eating? We're eating tacos. So this would be the parameter. The parameters, of course, are going to be tied in with whatever command. You want to think of this is the thing we want to do. This is what we want to do with it. Now, and the interesting thing is in Python, especially when we get into functions later on, you will see it where we can add other parameters. So we can come here, eat tacos and beans. Why not? We'll go on a food theme here. So again, we're sending tacos and beans to eat. So let's take a look at an actual real command in Python, and that is going to be the print command. Now, the print command is an interesting little command, and of course, it's already yelling at us, going to say, hey, you're supposed to end in a new line. Do you see that? If you don't leave this empty line at the end, it gets grumpy at you. I'll miss that one about 1,000 times. Don't stress. So one of the things you'll notice here is this is now our command, if you want to think about it, verb and noun, which you'll observe, if you drag it like that, it breaks, is that if we just executed this command on its own, or run up and press the play button, you'll see that it did print something. It actually printed blank, because we didn't specify what we wanted to print. Now, the interesting thing is you're like, oh, okay, so this is going to basically display things on the terminal here. Yeah, of course. So let's say we want to print hi, which is a pretty standard thing. Now, watch what happens when I run my code. You're going to get an angry error here. It is going to say that hi is not defined. You're sitting there going, I'm pretty sure people use hi all the time. And the reason for that is because Python needs to have a way to know the difference between a variable, which is a placeholder for a value. That's what we're going to be taking a look at next time, or something we actually want to display on the screen. So in this case, we have print hi. We don't want to print hi, a variable. We want to print hi, the word. So the way we do that is we simply enclose it in quotations. So if I come up here and press my green arrow again, you'll notice that it prints hi, which is actually pretty good. I like that. That works pretty good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and print hi again. I don't know, why not? Do hi, just to make my life a little bit simpler. Of course, we could do this with iteration, libraries, dictionaries, another day. What you'll observe here is it prints the word hi twice. It actually worked exactly the way that we intended to. Now, one of the things you'll love here is if I come in here and put a bunch of spaces and run this, you'll observe that hi, well, the reality is this hi actually ended here. You can actually see by clicking that my hi is here and this hi actually ended right here. There's another thing you're probably observing, and that's the fact that when I'm printing things and displaying things down on my terminal here, they don't have any fancy colors or anything, but there's a library for that called Blessed, and it does a really nice job. That is for a totally different tutorial video series. That thing's totally fun to play with. But you can see here that it prints our things on the screen. So let's go ahead and delete these. Actually, I'll leave it on for now, just in case you're taking notes, kind of a thing like that. So that's cool. It prints two highs. Now you're sitting here going, that's not bad. That's not bad. I can work with that. I get what the print command does, but what if you're trying to print more than one thing at one time? So you're sitting there going, what do you mean by that? Well, let's say we want to go ahead and create a variable called username. Now we're going to go into more details about variables. Let's go ahead and everybody calls me Paul because they see the P. I'm not a Paul. Let's create a variable called Paul, a username, and set it to a value of Paul. Now let's say we wanted to print those on the same line. Now things get a little more complicated. So if I wanted to, I could come in here and say hi space, and then I could do print Paul. Now notice our username here is going to be kept separately. I'm going to use it. Oh, we got into a new line here. I'll do that a million times. Don't worry. So you'll notice here that username is a variable holding a value called Paul. And we wanted to say hi plus the value of that username. Now, if I run this, it's going to go hi, Paul. Haha, that makes sense. Now, the cool thing is if I come in here, I'll do Patrick. I've heard Patrick a few times here. If I run it here, you'll see it says, hi, Patrick. But you're like, it would be really nice if we had the ability to actually put both of those things on the same line. I like that idea. So how would we do that? Well, the good news is we can use more than one parameter in a print statement. So let's go ahead and delete this one real quickly here. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to do hi. Now I'm going to do a comma, and then I'm going to go ahead and say username. Now what we've done here is there it is again. What we're going to do here is we're basically going to say hi, comma, username. Now your brain says comma, but when we actually run the code, you will observe it says hi, space, Patrick, even though there is no space here. And that is because we have basically attached these two together. Now this gets kind of fun. We can come in here and have fun with that. We always do a space after these. How are you? We can do one of these kind of things. Now, if we were to execute the command, you will notice that it prints these three in sequence on the same exact line. And you're like, wow, that's actually pretty handy. That works. That works. Is there any way to get rid of the space? Yes, there are many ways to get rid of that space. Not today, though. We'll get to that next time. That's a formatted string literals. And those are a lot of fun to play with. So as you can see, it actually works fairly well. It's a relatively simple thing to use, this print command. But sometimes we want things to get a little bit more sophisticated. Now, for example, you'll notice every time I print something, we get ourselves a new line. Sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to get a new line. What I wanted to get instead is I wanted everything to be on the same line, but I wanted to use more than one print statement. This is very helpful when everybody's doing everybody's favorite, this one. Anybody who's done a lot of Java recognizes that Christmas tree right away there. So if we want to do something like that, we have to get a little different. We have to tell Python we don't actually want to be using a different character at the end of a line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a print command again, and I'm going to say, we'll stick to the theme here. We'll say hi user underscore name. And what I'm going to do is grab something in Python and actually tell it to use a different end character. So I'm going to type in the word end, do an equal sign, and I'm going to do a double quotes. What I'm telling Python here is to say hi username, and then I'm telling it to end the line, not in a new line, but to end the line in a blank. So if I come over here and say, how are you? If I were to go ahead and run the code this time, what you'll see here is hi Patrick, how are you? Printed on the same line because we told line 11 here to go ahead and stop with basically a blank space rather than continuing onto it. Now, of course, if I were to come in here and do something really silly, and let's say put a smiley face here, I don't know why you would. If I run that now, what you'll observe is, hi, Patrick, smile, how are you? And the reason it's doing that is because we told it to end the line in a smiley face instead of a blank component. Now, there's a lot of different things we can actually shove in here for that particular purpose. One of the things you'll observe, by the way, is I instinctively put a space here so that it didn't get all mooshed together. If I did one of these things and press run, hi, Patrick, how are you? You can see, hey, we just found one of the methods to go ahead and get rid of that space that we thought was obnoxious. Now, the reason this is a very, very tricky, one of the problems you're going to face later is you have to remember to basically turn it back on. One of the things you'll run into is you're printing like 500 things at a loop or something like that, and you forget to do the last fresh new line. One of the things you can do, of course, is you can just print blank. And now if you run this again, what you'll observe here is this gets us a nice fresh blank line ready to rock there. So we don't have to worry about that too much. And again, that keeps it relatively simple for you. Now, there's a lot of other things we can do with the print command too, things like flushing and all that sort of fun stuff. But I'm going to avoid that for today because that's going to get complicated. There's actually a print itself is actually a wrapper for a system out command, which is actually a lot of fun to play with. But again, we'll leave that for another day as well. And then lastly, there's one thing that you're probably wondering a little bit about. You're saying, does this still work if I want to print a number? Well, that's where things get kind of interesting. So if I print like the 5, for example, here, you'll notice my 5 is not contained in quotes, and you'll also notice that my 5 doesn't have any special wrappers or anything around it. If I come up here and press run, you'll observe that it has no difficulty printing the number 5. And I can even come in here and get a little sophisticated. I could print, let's do print, your lucky number is 5. And your brain is getting there going, is this allowed? And you press that run key, and you'll observe it has no problem with it, actually. One of the things you'll notice is even though this is what they call an integer, we don't have to worry about that yet, that's going to go ahead and create that variable there. And you can see that it goes ahead and builds that component there as well, keeping it nice and simple for us, kind of jamming it all on there. Now you're sitting there going, okay, this isn't so bad. I can get handed them. The print command's not tricky. Is there anything that makes the print command tricky? Yes, the print command can get tricky, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. Now let's say that we want to put something in quotes. Uh-oh. Print, the day is good. Uh-oh. Now, what happens? When I run this code, of course, it's going to freak out. It's going to say, you have too many things here. What is this? What are you trying to achieve here? And the reason it doesn't like it is because a quote opens and closes. A quote opens and closes. So if you put a quote within a quote, you bust it. Now, Python has a bunch of different ways to solve this problem. And of course, the simplest way, which I always got a kick out of, is using apostrophes instead of quotes. So if I actually go, the book is good, you will observe that because I'm using apostrophes in place of quotes, it actually works better. Now, I'm a little old-fashioned, so my brain sees apostrophes and it thinks characters and not individual letters, but you can use whatever you want. If I actually run this code now, you will notice the last thing that gets printed is the book is good because of the fact that we are in quotes here in order to make that a little bit easier for us. Now, that only works sometimes because you run into fun things like this. Print, I can't go anywhere today. Oh my gosh. Oh boy. How do we solve that one? Oh boy. So we have ourselves an apostrophe and we have quotes and we have quotes. You're sitting there going, oh, that's easy. You just kind of change this to apostrophes. Haha, we can't fix that because then we can come in here and we can make this quote. Oh, it's still broken though because of what do I do? Well, one of the cool things is you actually have several built-in characters that you can utilize directly in a print statement. So again, there's a nice little list of these if it's something that you want to do. And if we ever want to print a character as it is, precede it with a backslash. So I can say, I can backslash apostrophe T stand this backslash quote book backslash quote and to sucker off with a parenthesis. So what you'll notice here is these backslashes enable me to go ahead and toss that character in there. So if I actually were to run this now, you can see here, I get my apostrophe no problem, and you'll notice I get my quotes no problem. Now, this actually can get a little bit further. There are several other characters we have at our disposal that we can also write with as well, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. For example, I can do silly things like this. I would like to use a \n new line, please. Now, if I run this, what you'll observe is it said I will like to use a new line, please. Now, one of the reasons this is so darn cool is because we can actually define where inside of our line we want the new line to actually be created. Now, there are other things. A hashtag creates a new line, just reminding you in case you have to come back to it later here at /n. One of the cool things is if you're really, really goofy, if you want to be old-fashioned, you could do one of these things, and what that would do is basically be 5 new lines, depending on how many. You can see, blasted that out. Good way to clear the console, but there are better ways to do that. So other things you can do too. Oh, do I need space? Oh, 2 spaces. I get it wrong every time. The other thing we can do too is we can actually create a tab, which is really cool. Print, this is /t split with /t tabs. Now, one of the things that's really cool about this one is if I run it, you will notice it gives me this little blip blip, just like that. It actually jumps to the next tab when it's actually printing the data. This is a really, really slick way to go ahead and make it so that it's a little easier to break up inputs. You'll see me do a lot of that later when we start taking a look at the input command, because that's going to be something we want to do quite a bit of as we're starting getting into a little bit more detail with our programs. Now, things get even better from here. I like my little splits. I like my little tabs. I like my symbols. I can finally deal with quotes. And one of the problems you're always going to have is you're going to want to print a lot of something at one time. If we want to print an entire story. Print, this is a story about a little girl journeying through the big, scary woods filled with fairy tales. So the problem with this here is this starts getting long. One of the great things about Python is it gives us the ability to actually split an entire command in half. And you're going to actually see quite a bit of this later. Let's say I wanted to go ahead and stop right here. I want to create a new. Now, there's two different ways we could do this. One thing, of course, we could do is bam, /n right there. So now if I run the command, you will see here it's going to go ahead and, but then it gives us this ugly thing. So then you're saying, oh, of course, there's a simpler solution. I could just come in here. Oh, I almost gave it away. So one of the other thing you could do too is you could create yourself another print statement. So now when you run it, you'll see that we get something like this. This works. But sometimes these get a little long. So one of the things we can do, I'll go ahead and back everything up real quick, because the great thing about Control-Z is we can actually split this print statement into 2 lines. So what I'm going to do is push a quote, comma, quote, and I'm going to press the Enter key. Now, what you'll notice here, Python go ahead and threw this massive indentation right in front of our second quote here, and it's gone ahead and broken this into 2 different components. Now, you're like, this is so handy, because you could just literally just come in here, do a comma, and say, and things happen with scary wolves. And we could just keep basically going with our print statement down the screen all afternoon. When we're done with it, we can just press Enter. We'll go ahead and do print a new line because science. And it's just awesome. Now, when I run this command, you're going to get slightly disappointed by the output. Now, when I run this, you will observe that it prints it all in one monstrous line. And you're sitting there going, oh, but it's on separate lines. But it's the comma command because it's the same thing as this. See what happened there. So one of the things you will have to do is if you do intend for this to be on new lines, is you're actually going to have to come in here and \n. Now, when you actually run this command, watch this. You will see here, this is a story about a little girl scurrying through the big scary woods of fairy tales, and things happen with scary wolves. Oops, that's not where the period would go. But you can see that you can actually break up your print statement pretty dramatically in order to make it a little bit cleaner. Now you're looking through all this going, okay, this is pretty good. I can work with this. This is clear stuff. There's nothing too weird going. I mean, you've got a little bit of variables. We'll do that next time. But you can also see just how flexible this command really, really can be. Enjoy.